Hello. Today I'd like to talk a little bit about a book that I recently finished reading. It's a very fascinating book and it's called How I Learned to Understand the World by Hans Rosling. Hans Rosling is a very famous doctor and researcher from Sweden. He also wrote the book Factfulness, which I believe is probably much more famous than this current book, but he's known for this book called Factfulness. I don't believe I've read this book. This was actually my first time reading his works. And this is more of an autobiography type of account where he's talking about his time. He's kind of talking about his childhood and what led to him choosing to become a doctor, and he's also talking about the journey that he took from a young researcher and doctor in Sweden, all the way to his work with politicians in the policy making arena in the United Nations, WHO, all the very big impact that his work has had. And I guess in between this, a large chunk of it talks about his work in Africa, especially in Mozambique. And this for me was, his accounts in Mozambique were the most fascinating for me. Basically, he talks about, when he talks about his time when he first went to Mozambique, he talks about the struggles as a doctor from Sweden who is young. And he's also trying to work with the gender and cultural norms of Mozambique, as well as raise awareness on Africa-specific illnesses. So he talks about how it's a very uphill battle trying to bring healthcare to a rather impoverished area of Mozambique, and all the struggles he kind of goes through as he's learning himself, not only as a young doctor, but he's also learning to provide healthcare to an area that's very much in need, where also resources are very inadequate. So he talks also about how he's trying to ration resources in this area of Mozambique. I found it quite fascinating when he was also talking about the family dynamics, because he had a wife and two young children now, and how he managed to, he tried his best to distinguish his personal life from his work life, but oftentimes both of them would kind of get enmeshed with one another. And he talks about this being a great struggle, especially in a place where doctors are so scarce, healthcare is so scarce, and how he tried to marry the two of them, but how he struggled a lot, but at the same time he learned a lot about himself in the process. Definitely what I found most interesting in throughout this account was when he's talking about his time in Mozambique, the Africa specific content, where he's kind of talking about how he raised awareness on certain illnesses, and the work that he did in collaboration with local people in Mozambique. I found this absolutely fascinating. And just to speak about the extent to which when he first was in Mozambique, the dire extent of the healthcare situation there, just to kind of give you some perspective. I remember I was reading an account of when he had an assistant. This gentleman, he had an assistant, and he was, if I remember correctly, he drew up a piece of paper, and he said, very simply, if the wound is infected versus uninfected wound, how basically two columns, how the person who's infected should go after the uninfected wound. So basically a very easy to read column. And he was saying that his assistant kind of looked up at him blankly, and Dr. Hans said, what's happening? And that's when the assistant for the first time told him that he's not able to read at all. He's illiterate. There was another time where Dr. Hans actually, for one of his assistants, he didn't actually know that his assistant had a sight problem, but the assistant wasn't even able to afford proper optical equipment to see clearly. So I believe the doctor had one of his own, so he kind of gave him a spare, and because of this assistant was able to see. So this shows just the extent to which not only was healthcare access quite dire. Not only healthcare resources dire, but even this situation with the healthcare staff. They were struggling so much. That just shows the extent to which the situation in healthcare for Mozambique was almost on its knees. And the most refreshing part was at the end, where he talks, I think 30 years later, he goes to Mozambique and he sees the drastic change, positive change, the uptake in people's awareness of health conditions. And the same hospital he worked at, how it looked much more clean, much more hygienic, and people were actually taking infection protocol more seriously. So he was also talking about how obviously there was still a way to go, but how after a couple decades of him visiting Mozambique again, he noticed in the same hospital that rapid growth. But I guess the whole premise of the book is that he not only talks about his experiences and how the experiences really humbled him, but also how he stresses on the importance of data and statistics in understanding trends of the world. He's a very big proponent for data and statistics, and he talks about this throughout his book. This is a very important theme. He takes data and statistics very seriously, and he says that it's actually a doorway to improving healthcare and overall outcomes for people around the world. I found this book very inspiring. If you like autobiographies and you particularly like quite inspiring and heartwarming accounts, I would say that this is definitely a book that you must read. It was a very easy read. I enjoyed it. I read it in a couple days, but highly recommend this book. Very interesting. Till then, I'll catch you later. Bye.